It is not possible to accurately judge the nature of the disease and the causes of death of the Lykovs, since none of the doctors saw them at that time and the case history as a document does not exist. Therefore, my conclusions are based on the stories of the Lykovs who survived. The main points that I highlighted were as follows. The Lykovs fell ill at the end of September, almost all at the same time. The first, after long cooling in water, was to try. According to Agafya, he suffered from shortness of breath, had difficulty breathing, fever, chills. As can be concluded, Tatrai had severe pneumonia, from which he died a week later. On the same days, all the other Lykovs fell ill. They also had symptoms of damage to the respiratory system, weakness, shortness of breath, a feeling of suffocation, cough, fever. Probably, Karpasipovich was the easiest to get sick. Natalia was the most sick, she had hemoptysis. As the Lykovs say, after self-treatment with a decoction of nettle, rhubarb and bloodstone, celandine, their condition improved somewhat. However, hard work in the cold, digging potatoes from under the snow, preparing firewood, Tatrai's funeral, again led to a deterioration in the Lykovs' health. 7 symptoms of intestinal inflammation and bleeding from it, probably hemorrhagic enterocolitis, were added. With symptoms of complete exhaustion and loss of strength, he died. During Savina's illness, Natalia took care of him, did the laundry. By the way, after the death of Savin, all his dirty linen and outerwear were carried away from the hut and burned. It looks like the Lykovs understood that this could be a source of infection. After the death of Savin, Natalia's condition deteriorated again catastrophically, and after 10 days she died. At the same time Agafya was seriously ill and Karpasipovich was easier. They also showed signs of pneumonia. Only by the end of winter did Agafya feel relief. The younger body coped with the disease. From what has been said, the conclusion suggests itself that the cause of the Lykovs' illness and death was some kind of infection, the development of which was facilitated by cooling, hard exhausting work and, of course, the weakening or absence of specific immunity. The milder course of the disease in the eldest Karpasipovich is probably due to the greater training of his immune systems, since he grew up and lived for many years in the world, in contact with many people, and therefore with many infections. According to my observations, Karpasipovich gave up a little, wrinkles increased, his back was bent. There is no longer that easy, flying, gallant gait, although he still looks younger than his years, fast, mobile, physically strong enough. The grandfather complains of frequent pain in the back and lower abdomen, hearing loss. The latter is probably only a small trick of the old man, since the hearing test showed him to be in good condition. At a distance of about 15 meters, he hears a slight click of the camera well. Karpasipovich still sees well, reads his books freely even in low light conditions. His sense of color is the same as that of Agafya, it is not disturbed, he distinguishes color correctly. Karpasipovich's face is swollen, especially under the eyes, which is probably associated with mosquito and midge bites. With excitement, his hands begin to shake, shortness of breath appears up to 28 times a minute, the veins in his neck swell. However, there are no clear signs of pulmonary and cardiovascular insufficiency. To the question, how old are you? He answered -82. 3 years ago he said -84. Why? According to my calculations, Karpasipovich should be 87 years old. Agafya has grown somewhat stuck. There is a slight swelling of the eyelids, possibly as a result of a change in the salt diet. And Agafya's eyes, it turns out, are grey-green. She notes that in the winter of 1981 there was a severe suffocation, it is both choking and choking, it is so hard, her strength has recently diminished, she began to get tired quickly, her sore hand interferes with her work. She complains of pain and swelling in the lower third of the left forearm, muscle weakness in this arm, a growth on the bone. Agafya also has a slight swelling of the joints on the hands. She feels in them, more in the morning, aches, numbness. Sis, I see a birch bark on the floor, I take it, there is no feeling, my hands endure, they have aches. It was from hard work in the cold, in the ground and dampness that she developed the phenomena of polyarthritis, inflammation of the joints. However, she refused the examination and our help. Clothes on Lykovs are no longer homespun. At first Karpasipovich was wearing a light brown robe, like a hospital gown, dark trousers made of plain fabric and felt boots. Then, when he came to the fire, he was already in disguise, a grey felt hat, an almost black jacket, trousers and rubber boots, broad knee. Agafya was wearing a dark grey shirt, pants and fashionable rubber boots. Agafya saw a camera lying on a tree stump and did not go to our fire. Karpasipovich came up and said that Agafya was afraid of our camera. We removed him, Karpasipovich called Agafya. We spent the night in the Lykovs hut on the floor. They were so cordially invited that it was inconvenient to refuse. Agafya was already asleep on the bench, and not on the floor, as 3 years ago. Karpasipovich slept on a kovchik, a bench near the stove. The Lykovs got up at 7 o'clock in the morning. Between times we prayed, then we had breakfast. On the eve of the Lykovs, they cooked potatoes and soup, potatoes, rasula, rice groats. They ate everything, poured everything from the cup into a spoon. The potatoes were dipped in salt. Maybe this is the reason for the swelling on the face. Agafya taught us how to make fire. A tinder is placed on the flint and a spark is knocked out by a crestal, a piece of a file. When the tinder gets warm, it is placed between two coals and the fire is fanned, and a splinter is inserted into the gap between the coals and it lights up. This is on fire for Agafya, but our attempts were unsuccessful. August 18. The Lykovs need to go to the lower hut to dry the berries, get a pine nut. We are going with them. He presented Karpasipovich with a blue flashlight. The old man was overjoyed. Eyes lit up, smiled. He asked me to show you how to light it. I tried it myself, I liked it. Said it's from the sun, like the sun. Asked the price. I said 2-3 rubles. It is not very expensive, the grandfather stated. It turns out that he already understands prices. I explained to my grandfather that when the batteries run out, the light will be bad and will go out completely. How long will it burn, how to make it burn again? Followed by a question. Explained in detail and showed. The grandfather was satisfied. Agafya, as if in exchange, gave me a pair of her old moccasins, made of merle leather. A friendly exchange took place, everyone was satisfied. At 15 o'clock we all went together to the lower hut, leaving half of our things. The way took 35 minutes to the pass, and then descend for another hour and a half. The Lykovs tolerate physical activity quite well. So, when climbing a steep mountain for 30 minutes with a load on his shoulders, the breathing rate for Karpasipovich was 32 times per minute, for Agafya -24, and for the members of our expedition it ranged from 36 to 40. After a 2-hour journey through the mountains, Karpasipovich without stopping, he immediately took up other hard work, while the members of the expedition needed rest. On the way, Agafya showed the place where last year they put out the fire for 2 days. They were afraid that it would go to the upper hut. They extinguished until they lost their pulse, then they were sick for a long time. According to Agafya, only the rain stopped the fire. The trail goes all the time through blueberries, lingonberries, honeysuckle bushes constantly come across. Agafya showed us natural plantations of badan with surprisingly large leaves like cabbage. In the years of famine, they collected incense, boiled the root in 7 waters, and ate. They also used but to dye clothes shovels. Agafya walks along a path about 30 meters from Vyacheslav, who smokes, and expresses displeasure. What a bad smell, there is nothing to breathe. This is a demonic occupation. After going to the lower hut, Agafya treated us to red currants and nuts. The Lykovs are quite used to us, they keep themselves at ease, they talk freely. They said that the Trier refused the sacrament before his death. The Lykovs interpret this as, I did not want to die, I was young, I wanted to live. Before his death, Savin asked for fresh and salted fish and white bread and butter. The fish were given, but they did not have time to bring butter and bread from the geologists. Before her death, Natalia bequeathed Karpasipovich and Agafya to live in the lower hut, closer to people and better arable land. The Tri is buried near the lower hut behind the stream, Savin and Natalia at the upper one, together with their mother, who died 22 years ago from hunger. It was a terrible year, a terrible harvest failure, even the animals were gone, said Karpasipovich. The Lykovs mourning begins with Agafya's words, Tyatya, bless. And the prayer begins. The Lykovs already eat rice, buckwheat, They especially love and consider oatmeal useful. Groats are sent by co-religionists and relatives. Eat 2 times a day. When they work hard, they still eat potatoes at lunchtime. The roof of the hut is covered with gutters. In a log split in half, a chute is hollowed out in the middle and the roof is covered, laying the logs alternately up and down with a chute. We watched Agafya bake bread. It includes dried potatoes with corn, ground to flour and wheat or rye flour in a ratio of about 6:1. The Lykovs have daily bread, ordinary, everyday, and festive. It is whiter than daily bread and is made of a bagel. Vasko, a new word heard from the Lykovs, means good in a superlative degree. By evening, Vyacheslav was going to go to the geologists. They tried to persuade him not to go for the night, but referring to the lack of time, he still left. There is something restless in my soul. Geologists are about 20 kilometers away, and there are 4 hours of daylight left. Yes, and walking alone without a weapon in an unfamiliar taiga is not at all safe. Will it work somehow? I slept at night with Lev Stepanovich in a tent. We are trying to separate from the Lykovs so as not to infect them, which we set up not far from the hut, meters from the cliff. It rained most of the evening and night. August 19. After breakfast, the members of our expedition went to the upper hut for the rest of their belongings. Karpasipovich blessed us on the road. The Lykovs themselves remained in the lower hut. Walking light was not so hard, despite the almost continuous uphill climb. Yes, probably, and we are already being drawn into the load. Weather with variable rain all day and evening. But we seem to be getting used to wet feet and clothes. Walking light, you can clearly see what pristine beauty is around. Going into the hut, they photographed her interior, objects and clothes. New additional windows have been cut in the Lykovs huts. In the middle of the hut there is a stick with a metal trident at the end. This is a device for a torch, called light. The chimney on the hut is wooden, a hollowed out log, coated with clay from the inside. The chisel of the Lykovs from pre-revolutionary times with the stigma of some Petrov catches my eye. In the hut I counted 18 sacred books. There are very old ones, literally decayed at the edges. Some fat old book stands on the shrine and, probably, has not been opened for many years. It is covered in dust and turned black. 2 icons are very dusty. One depicts Christ, the other is so dark that you cannot tell what is painted there. Most of the books do not have the year of publication, but on 2 we find, Psalter, in leather binding, was published in the Moscow Old Believer book printing press in the summer of 74-23. The front book tells about what and how it will be after death, published in 74-19. In the hut everything is mixed up, old, made by the Lykovs, things and donated, civilians, 7 axes, many knives, scissors, candles, files, wire, enamel dishes, several pairs of rubber boots. Agafya was presented with a colored umbrella, but she does not need it at all, it lies under the roof. A flower is growing on the window in a birch bark tusa. Agafya has planted it. Under the roof hang beautiful camas skis made by Agafya from willow and spruce. I can imagine how worried the Lykovs are now, that we are alone in the hut. We will still do quite objectionable deeds. But, of course, we try not to touch anything with our hands and not change the routine. I remember how yesterday morning Agafya went out of the hut, looked with emotion at the huge burgundy poppy and said, "During the night the flower has grown." Behind her, Karpasipovich solidly, on a low note, stated, "Bask." Elvira Viktorovna today painted a sketch, the Lykovs estate. We spent the night in the Lykovs hut, having flooded the piece of iron stove. In the morning I woke up due to the fact that the whole hut was in smoke. A firebrand remained in the stove. The story repeated 3 years ago, when we almost suffocated. Strange stove. August 20. As always, we got up with Lev Stepanovich at 7 o'clock. Bonfire, tea, talk. The rest are asleep. At 8:30 am Elvira Viktorovna is looking for a place to paint. I found it, didn't even have breakfast, and rushed headlong into work. In the evening we went to the lower hut. We went with a load, but quite easily. We get used to the loads. The hip belt is already fastened to the last hole. In the evening the Lykovs came to the fire. Interesting conversation about a bear, flights to the moon. They hold on freely, uninhibited. In a conversation, we hear words and phrases that are unusual for us. For example, got away, passed away, died, Poker call, sergeant, box, to go somewhere, commonplace, to go there and back in one day. Porch, the lower back, commercial, yes so. When I got it, there was a need, I brought water from the stream, says Agafya. Pogrona, border guards, burned all the houses. Karpasipovich talks about their forcible eviction from Lykovskaya Zamka, their original place of residence is on the Abokan River. Sklinitsa is a bottle. Married. They stir up their minds, they continue to tell a lie. They encroached on a fish, but came with nothing, they wanted to catch a fish, but it didn't work out. There was a privilege, there was an easy life. Mortal clothes, cloth stored in case of death. Fire dope, vodka. Karpasipovich, talking about a good man, says, he doesn't get hurt with vodka, there is no art behind him. Karpasipovich explains, there is no need to say thank you, because there used to be an idol, and worshipping an idol is not good. According to Karpasipovich, once, when he scolded children, the try said, what a teacher, such students. What audacity. Protest. In the afternoon we were busy with the capital arrangement, we put up another tent, built a shed, and under it a table so that there was a place to store food, eat and sit and chat in rainy weather. The Lykovs threw branches of birch and cedars on the arable land. We asked, for what? Answer, for fertilization. This is probably not a bad fertilization method. For example, the Lykovs have been planting the same potato seeds for over 40 years, and the potatoes are just as good as before. The Lykovs have 2 cats and 1 cat, a gift from geologists. They are very happy with them. Previously, a very large part of the harvest was taken away by mice and chipmunks, despite the fact that various traps, bowls, were constantly constructed for them. Now these rodents are successfully destroyed by cats. I remember how 3 years ago we spent the night in the Lykovs hut, so at night mice literally walked over us, and now they are inaudible. It is interesting that 2 cats independently travel from one hut to another, but this is about 8 kilometers through the dense taiga through the mountains. Moreover, they often make these journeys at night. The cats are often left alone when the Lykovs go to another hut, and apparently, do not suffer from hunger, they look smooth and satisfying. The Lykovs are very fond of them, play with them like children, stroke, caress, sleep with them. In general, these are equal members of their family. Agafya herself sues Lapatina for the fall from grey store materials sent by her relatives. She sues quickly, skillfully, she also cut herself. We praise for a good job, she smiles shyly, but it is noticeable that she is very pleased. Agafya gave Elvira Viktorovna a cross made of white metal, a little more than Natalia gave me 3 years ago. Agafya and Karpasipovich persuade Elvira Viktorovna to stay with them, we will dig potatoes and knock them out. Nikolai Mikhailovich asked Agafya to show his sore hand. She laughed and refused. Then he says to Elvira Viktorovna, if Nikolai Mikhailovich was a Christian doctor, I would show him. Probably, this should be understood in such a way that they would accept the help of a baptized doctor of the same faith with them. In the conversation, it turns out that the Lykovs do not recognize healers and wise men. Agafya says, what is the use of magic? The body heals, but the soul destroys. Upon learning that my toothache is aching, Agafya gently teases me, saying, Doctor, let him heal himself. What phrases! It is immediately felt that Agafya remembers much from the Holy Scriptures by heart. August 21. Sunday. The Lykovs are resting. Agafya put on a black shawl with bright flowers, on her head she strengthened a ladder, an object for prayer, like a rosary, made by herself from the vertebrae of a grayling. Bright, sunny morning. Found a very nice place. Immediately behind the Lykovs hut there is a sheer cliff and a wonderful view of the Abokan Canyon opens from it. I put a plank between the stones, behind my back there are 2 birch trees standing next to each other, I sit as in an armchair. Today we are going fishing, but while I have free time, I write down some of my observations and impressions. Agafya says that they came to the place of the lower hut, where we are now, 38 years ago. Agafya was then 2 years old, she was born on March 29, and she was baptized on April 3. They came from a parking lot, which they had on the Aranat River. It flows into the Abokan River above the Shek, 6 to 7 kilometers. They left the hut on the Aranat River because someone found them there. We moved to a new place in winter. All their belongings and food supplies, potatoes lasted 3 years, until they cultivated new arable land and got a good harvest, were transported on sledges. For almost the entire first winter, until the hut was cut down, we lived in a hut. You just have to imagine. In a severe winter in the taiga, live in a hut with small children. Please share this video on your social networks, using the buttons under the video, and subscribe to the channel. I ask you to go and watch other videos about Agafya Lykova, which you can see now on the screen in the end screensavers. There are a lot of rare and interesting facts about the Hermit. Thank you all for watching.